In 2008, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency spent $22 million and deployed 50 investigators to a 512-acre ranch in Utah to find out what was happening there. This wasn't for a reality TV show. It was a classified government program run by a DIA rocket scientist who took a book about a haunted ranch to the Pentagon and walked out with $22 million in funding. What they found over 2 years of investigation was classified, but what has since come out through FOIA releases and the program director's own published accounts is the strangest thing the U.S. government has ever studied officially. And this year in 2026, it just got a little bit weirder. The man who started all this is named James Lakatsky. He was a rocket scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He wasn't a UFO enthusiast. He was a technical analyst who evaluated aerospace threats for a living. He read a book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, by investigative journalist George Knapp and biochemist Colm Kelleher, about a family that bought a ranch in Utah in 1994 and lasted 22 months before selling and leaving. Cattle found dead with surgical precision wounds and no tracks in the surrounding snow. Orbs of light moving through their house. A wolf that absorbed rifle rounds at close range and walked away. A presence that seemed to know it was being observed. Now most people read that book and put it down and move on, but Lakatsky, he brought it to the Pentagon. And within a year, he'd secured $22 million in congressional funding, pushed through quietly by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and launched one of the most unusual classified programs in American government history. The program was called AAWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. The name was deliberately written to not raise questions in appropriations committees. Nothing about haunted ranches, nothing about orbs or wolves, just aerospace threat analysis. And that should tell you something right there. When you need that kind of cover story, it's because you're doing something that would be impossible to justify on its face. The contract went to Bigelow Aerospace, owned by Robert Bigelow, who already owned Skinwalker Ranch. And the primary research site was the ranch itself. They called it Project Ranch internally. And what they found there over 2 years of systematic investigation is what I want to walk you through. The AAWSAP team documented phenomena across multiple categories. Radiation spikes, not background level fluctuations, bursts of ionizing radiation in specific areas of the property. What the investigators called hot zones, and they were strong enough to cause nausea. In the FOIA released files, this isn't just anecdote. Equipment interference, cameras malfunctioning in specific locations, communication gear cutting out. And then there's this detail. When the team tried to record certain events, the recordings came back blank, even though the equipment had functioned normally before and after. It seemed to know when it was being recorded. Colm Kelleher, the biochemist who served as the deputy administrator of the program, was driving near the ranch when a large orb shot down from the sky, hovered in front of their vehicle, then vanished. He spent years trying to find a rational explanation for that, and he didn't find one. The phenomenon behaved as if it were under intelligent control. That phrase appears in multiple accounts from multiple investigators who came in as trained skeptics. It anticipated what researchers were going to do. It appeared just outside of camera range and worked around every trap that was set for it. Travis Taylor, a NASA scientist who became one of the lead investigators, put it plainly. Whatever was there knew it was being watched, and it chose what to show. I spent some time thinking about those words because an unintelligent, natural phenomenon doesn't just choose what to show. Only something that's aware does that. It's not just a location with unusual phenomena. It's a location where the phenomena attach to people and follow them home. The program director Lakatsky called it the Hitchhiker effect, documented in at least 5 cases involving senior intelligence and military personnel who visited the ranch for professional investigation purposes. They came home with something that they didn't go there with. One senior intelligence officer returned to his home on the East Coast. His entire family began experiencing paranormal events. Orbs of light appearing inside the house. A wolf that walked on 2 legs appearing in their backyard and leaving deep scratch marks in a tree. A wolf walking on 2 legs in Washington, D.C., after a trained intelligence officer visited a ranch in Utah. Lakatsky was asked directly, how does something from Utah end up in D.C.? And he said, whatever it is, it doesn't travel the way that we travel. Now that's a rocket scientist saying that, about something documented by trained military intelligence personnel. What I find most significant about the Hitchhiker effect is that it wasn't limited to Skinwalker Ranch. The AAWSAP's own research found similar phenomena in people who had UAP close encounters in completely unrelated locations. The ranch itself wasn't producing this effect, it was just where the contact was concentrated enough to study it systematically. Whatever was happening there was happening at other places too. Some of the personnel on this project experienced physical health issues that were documented by medical doctors. Radiation burn-like injuries, severe neurological symptoms. The program documented these as physiological events, not psychological ones. There are some specific findings from the AAW-SAP investigation that I find genuinely fascinating. The team captured photographic evidence of 2 sets of barefoot human tracks that merged into one. 2 sets into 1 set. No explanation for where the second one went. They also documented another set of tracks that walked through fresh snow, approached a 5-foot-tall barbed wire fence, and continued on the other side without disturbing the fence at all. Barefoot tracks walk through a fence without touching it. That's in the program documentation. The 38 research topics AAW-SAP funded include, and the list tells you where the investigation was actually going: warp drives, invisibility cloaking, traversable wormholes, anti-gravity, high-frequency gravitational waves. They were working backward from the phenomenon, trying to find the physics that could account for what was being observed. And then there's a development right here in 2026 that kind of prompted me to look into all this stuff again. A federally contracted science team established a permanent field station at the ranch this year. They ran a 72-hour complete electronics blackout, powering down all the equipment, specifically to test whether the anomalies were instrumentation-driven. But the anomalies continued, confirmed by passive infrared, witnessed by 2 independent observer crews stationed off-ranch. That was the moment the phrase, "cannot be closed," entered the investigator notes. Something is there. It's reproducible at a specific GPS location, and nothing has been able to make it stop. Now here's where the official record gets interesting. In 2023, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the Pentagon's current UAP investigation body, officially acknowledged Skinwalker Ranch as a high-priority signature management test location. They acknowledged it officially and on the record. Brandon Fugel, the current owner, responded to the May 2026 Pentagon UAP file release by saying the government's disclosure was in alignment with data his team has been capturing on site. He described Skinwalker Ranch as the center of gravity for a Pentagon-funded black-budget program studying these phenomena. Those were his words. Lakatsky sat down on a podcast in November 2025 and said on camera that everything he wrote in his books was exact, and that what he would say to Congress under oath if he was ever asked would be identical. But so far, he hasn't been invited. The program produced a 34-volume report. The AARO stated that certain volumes don't exist or lack utility. Lakatsky's team has strongly disputed that. Some of the volumes, based on partial documentation researchers have reviewed, cluster around something the AAW-SAP investigators internally called Project Consciousness, the systematic effort to characterize the interaction between UAP phenomena and human awareness. They went looking for advanced aerospace technology, and they ended up studying what this thing does to the human mind. That shift from physics to consciousness is very revealing about where this investigation actually went. My last video about the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis ended with the question: if something has been here the whole time, what has it been doing? Well, the AAW-SAP conclusions, as Lakatsky has described them, were that the phenomenon is real, intelligent, responsive to human attention, and has been interacting with humans for a very long time. Not visiting, just interacting. The Hitchhiker effect tells you that it doesn't just sit in a field in Utah. It makes contact, it follows people, it affects them physically and psychologically in ways that persist long after they leave. And the 2026 finding, a stable, reproducible anomaly at a specific GPS location that a government-contracted science team cannot close after complete electronics blackout, tells you that it has no apparent intention of going anywhere. And I keep going back to what Lakatsky said. It doesn't travel the way we travel. If the crypto-terrestrial framework is right, if something indigenous has been on this planet here alongside us for thousands of years at a level we can't fully perceive, then Skinwalker Ranch isn't an anomaly. It's a location where the boundary between our experience and theirs happens to be thin enough that both sides can observe each other. The government spent $22 million trying to understand what was on the other side of that boundary. They produced 34 volumes of findings. Most of it's still classified, and whatever is at that ranch is still there. The books that cover this the most thoroughly are The Skinwalker by Kelleher and Knapp, and also The Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which includes Lakatsky, Kelleher, and Knapp. That second book went through 14 months of Pentagon security review before publication, and everything in it was released to the public. Brandon Fugel said in the next season of Skinwalker Ranch they're going to present data that's in alignment with what was just found in the Pentagon files. My thoughts on this is that there's probably many more spots like this across the world that we just haven't found yet. I know I have, but have you ever experienced something that you just can't explain? Something that felt like the rules just didn't apply during that moment in time? I'd love to hear it in the comments if you did, and also if you think that there's other spots like this across the world, which I think there's probably plenty. As always, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. The support has been outstanding. I couldn't thank everybody enough for just spending their time watching these videos. I have a couple new ideas that I'm working on that kind of ties into all this stuff to add even more layers to the mystery and more questions that are going to probably be left unanswered. So please subscribe, like, and drop that comment. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.